So let me just ask you this question. Lachi, how did you become blind?
It started in utero. So I was born with it. For a long time, I called it a congenial disease, not knowing that it was congenital. So I was like, my disease is real nice. It's a congenial disease. But I was born legally blind with a disease called coloboma, super rare disease that was that my eyes were not fully developed when I was a fetus. And I also acquired the disease of keratoconus, which is degenerative, and so I am slowly losing my vision as well. Like the little bit I have.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to have that background because people are always, and just by nature, we're nosy people, right? So I'm glad you just shared that with me.
Well, I do have a non-visible disability for some people. I mean, if you hang around me long enough, you'll start to see it like, oh, you can't see nothing. But
right.
Just witness me walking down the street because I don't use a cane or a dog. It's difficult to tell on first sight.
And that might not be a bad thing, right? I mean, sometimes we're just trying to look at, we want sort of, I guess, not obvious disabilities,
right.
Undisabled, not obvious disabilities, because we don't like to say invisible. But, a disability that's not obvious, I mean, that's the whole point. Why do we have to see it to know it? And then why do we have to see it to name it, right? I mean, we want to sort of remove ourselves from these labels. We want people to show up as they are, right? And then people accept us on the human. We're a human being, and it doesn't matter whether you know what I'm saying. Whether you see it, you don't see it. I mean, hey, can't we just meet each other on equal terms? Well,
one of my issues with that though is that because I do have a visual impairment and because I don't appear to have one, people will misjudge some of my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm holding a book very close, or if I'm super close to my computer, people might think, oh, maybe she don't know how to read, as opposed to the fact that I can't see the letters and I have to hold something close. So it does start to get to a point where people start to substitute their own prejudgments. And I'm like, well, I mean, you're going to prejudge me anyway, but prejudge me the right way.
And that's yes. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because about self-disclosure. So, for you and for others, we talk about self-disclosure, how it's so important sometimes. If we do not hold people accountable, you can't hold people accountable, right? I mean, so talk about disclosure as it relates to you showing up as a performer. And I think you just sort of hinted to it just a while ago. But just talk to us more about that. This whole idea that when you go into the studio, for example, or go out to to produce, do you self-disclose?
For them, it depends. Especially if people come, because I'm also a producer, and people come to my studio to work, and I have to tell them straight up. And I keep it jocular. You know me, I'm always clowning around, just trying to keep things light.
Right.
And
exactly.
So I'll tell people right up front, and I'll be funny about it, keep it a little lighthearted. And a lot of times people are just impressed. They're like, "Wow, you are really knowing your way around this studio. You know all the gear, you know all the tools." Sometimes I do have to let venues know because it's dark and I got to get around. I need to know how to get on the stage without falling on my face. Again, that has happened. Right. And the only thing that I had feared in the past was, when doing high-level collaborations, when working with major labels, because I had this complex of being afraid of people thinking that I wasn't smart, I tried to keep that out of my lexicon when people were introducing me to people. And I didn't want people to feel, if you want to hate on me because I'm blind, that's one thing. But if you want to feel sorry for me, that is not what I'm here for. Exactly. And I really didn't want people to feel like they have to walk on eggshells or feel afraid or be like, is she okay? But frankly, that was a disqualifying fear on my part, because now that I'm so much more confident than I used to be, people don't know how to feel sorry for me. So it doesn't matter what I say.
Right. So do you have any dilemmas then, and in terms of disclosing? Do you sometimes confront a dilemma whether or not you should or should not?
Um, I haven't, not, well, I mean, I'm so public about it now that it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But it is, it depends on who you're talking to. Some people still are turned off by it. But most people are very welcoming of it.
Okay.
And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm in a tough industry. You know, if you look at my industry, it's full, and I'm in the dance and pop and EDM music lane. And if you look at it, there are two types of people, right? In the industry, there's the artists, and then there are the people that actually make the decisions. And when you look at artists, you see, I mean, let's not mince words here. You see mostly white males and white skinny females.
Exactly.
And when you look at the people behind the scenes making the decisions, you see white older males or black older males. And I don't fit into any of those categories. And the artists, they're very confident, I guess, and privileged and used to getting that kind of stuff. And the people in the background pulling the strings are very confident and they're sure of themselves. And I'm from a place of, my parents were immigrants, you know, I'm from a place of being on the outside, of always having to know my place, of always having to be quiet, of always having to be seen and not heard. And to, you know, as someone who grew up with a disability and constantly kind of being picked on and not really having any friends, and to try to jump into an industry where everyone in it is very privileged and very sure of themselves.
Okay.
I mean, I have to self-disclose because I have to advocate for myself and I have to feel as confident as I possibly can in order to not sink in the industry that I'm in.
Exactly.
You know?
Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons why I had to just own it, come all the way out, not be afraid, and knowing that, like, hey, if somebody doesn't like me, it doesn't have to do with something they don't know about me, because they know everything. It's right out there, and this is me, and this is why I behave this way.
Awesome. Awesome. So, you know, I really appreciate you saying that in terms of it, because it speaks to the whole sort of philosophy of what Divas with Disabilities is all about. And that is showing up unapologetically, standing in your platform boldly and proudly, you know, and confessing who you are, professing who you are. And so, and I appreciate and value, that was one of the things that I valued about you when I first met you. Your ego is extremely powerful. And I think the ego is very healthy. I mean, you know, we talk about the ego all the time. I think you need a good dose of ego. And as Black women with disabilities, you better have it. You know, I keep my ego in my pocket and I pull it out whenever I need to.
You better whip it out.
You better
whip it out when you need to whip out.
Absolutely. So listen, before we transition to our panel, I'm going to give you this last question, and then we're going to take a little break before we come back for our panel discussion. But here's what I want to ask you. You know, what do you think your life would be like without the ADA?
You know, I honestly very much appreciate that there's official legislation in place, because you know what? Every marginalized group should get a chance to have their real heyday and to walk up to leadership and say, put this in pencil, put this in paper. You know, we as minorities, we've done it. The LGBTQ plus community has done it. The trans community is standing up and making sure things are getting done. And yes, we're a strong group of a lot of different sectors. But it is very powerful to be able to have legislation in writing saying, you know what, here are some baseline guidelines of how we need to start treating people that are different from us. Right. And we can begin to build on those guidelines. And if we didn't have that, and I don't know how much of the history anyone is really interested in, but when we were first getting those laws passed, we were ignored and ignored and ignored until a full coalition was made. Until vets came and joined up with people with mobile disabilities and joined up with people with hearing and visual disabilities and psychological and mental and other physical disabilities. And the ADA says all of these people that are different from you have these rights. And I believe that it's very important. I believe that it's very important to have ink.
Well stated. Well stated. Well, I thank you so much for sharing your lived experience with us. And of
Mhm.
course, that's just an abbreviated part of who you are, right? So we're going to get ready to go into our panel discussion. So I wanted to ask Tracy if she could put a graphic up while we sort of transition and get ourselves ready to go into our next part for that. Are there any more questions, Tracy, before I go on to our next discussion
Just a
point?
question from Philbert Matheson. He asked Lachi, how is it working in the music industry? Do you get employee or ADA protections like regular employees
Good,
in the
Oh,
music
wow.
industry?
good question.
So that's a great question. And the answer is, I wish. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, to be a freelancer, to be somebody who works for themselves, to be somebody who doesn't get a W-2, the rules are different in the first place for artists. I mean, Giselle will tell you too.
Probably.
In the acting industry and dancing and things like that, it is very difficult to get support. What you need, what I'm personally trying to do is really start building that coalition of different artists so that maybe one day in the future we ourselves can put something together. If you think about it, the musicians union was just a bunch of musicians that came together and said, you know what, we're going to make a union and we're going to make this happen. And I believe that, that's what all of these organizations are here today. Divas with Disabilities not excluded, Eyes Like Mine not excluded. We ourselves are going to have to build that thing. And I mean, I'm one coming out here saying a lot and speaking loud, and I'm encouraging all of my, Giselle is another one coming out and speaking loud, but I encourage all of my artistic sisters with disabilities to come out and speak loud. Mm-hmm. Let us be a thing. Let us be a thorn in the side of everyone who hears us. Mm-hmm. And that is how that will be made. That is how this will be built. And it just starts with each of us individuals starting and screaming and shouting.